Christy Clark has announced she will resign as leader of the BC Liberals and her seat in West Kelowna come August 4th this week. While some had speculated and hoped this would be the case after the NDP Green government came to power, others believe she would stay on to fight them in opposition, given an election could be called fairly soon. Clark even had indicated on Radio NL and Kamloops last Thursday, just the day before her announcement, that she was going to stay on in opposition. However, close observers had noted that while BC Liberal MLAs like Andrew Wilkinson and Rich Coleman had immediately taken up the job as fierce critics of the NDP, the former premier was nowhere to be seen or heard. This leaves the province and supporters of the right-of-centre BC Liberals coalition, of mainly federal Conservatives but also many blue Liberals or federal Liberals who just can't stand the NDP, uncertain of their party's future. The current incarnation of the party has really only had 3 leaders since they officially severed ties with the Liberal Party of Canada back in 1987. That was when Gordon Wilson led the party out of the wilderness in the 1991 election when the Social Credit dynasty collapsed. But it wasn't until Gordon Campbell took the reins of the party that the BC Liberals really emerged as the second choice to the NDP in this province after the Socreds were completely shut out and wiped out in the 1996 election. There is a contrast between Campbell and Clark's eras as BC Liberals leader, and I want to continue to explore that contrast with you, our viewers, and British Columbians across our province as we gear up for another leadership campaign. What direction should the BC Liberal Party go? I'll get to that in just a minute. But first, let's address the risks involved with Clark resigning, and why I thought it would be best if she stayed on in opposition and possibly contest the next election. By resigning, Clark has handed Premier Horgan at least a 2-year term, possibly even longer. The province and the people of BC are familiar with Christy Clark, and love her or hate her, yeah, she's polarizing for sure, but so are the NDP. So should the NDP mess up early or get off to a rocky start, British Columbians may have returned the BC Liberals and Clark to power if another election was called within the next couple of years. But now, by the time a new leader is chosen, A, the public in BC may be unfamiliar with this person and need months, if not years, to get to know them well enough to elect them as the next premier. Or B, John Horgan calls a snap election immediately after the new leader is chosen, a la Jean Chrétien in 2000, right after the Canadian Alliance chose Stockwell Day as their leader. And you get an early election with totally unprepared BC Liberal Party and an underexposed BC Liberal leader. The one saving grace to this would be a BC Liberal leader who is extremely popular and familiar with people here in the Lower Mainland, where the BC Liberals were soundly defeated on election night and basically lost their majority because of their poor performance in Surrey, Vancouver, and Burnaby. As I mentioned, there is a contrast between the previous leader and premier of BC before Christy Clark, Gordon Campbell, and Christy Clark herself, the least of which is their federal party affiliation. Clark, a longtime federal Liberal, was never really a Justin Trudeau-type Liberal, but maybe more of a Paul Martin-type Liberal, conscious of balanced budgets. While Gordon Campbell, at least during his first 2 terms, was a tax-cutting, spending-cutting fiscal conservative. Campbell, though, he seemed to lose his way during his 3rd term, however, as he introduced the job-killing carbon tax at the advice of now federal Liberal MP Joyce Murray, who at the time was his environment minister. And I guess they were attempting to capture some of the support of Stéphane Dion's infamous green shift that he rolled out just before the BC Liberals did. Then there was the disastrous rollout after the 2009 election of the HST. The HST is what eventually cost Campbell his job, I believe. So the question now becomes, which way does the party go in this new leadership contest? And I have to say, it better come up with an urban plan to win the seats back they lost here in the Lower Mainland, while also embracing their grassroots fiscal conservative nature and figure out a way to make life more affordable for people here in the Lower Mainland. The BC Conservative Party is still in shambles and crippled by debt, and the Social Credit Party is being held hostage by political operatives with nothing better to do. So this is BC's chance to reshape the BC Liberals into the fiscal conservative and fiscally prudent party that first came to power in 2001. But who will run? Well, speculation is abound, as you might expect. Currently, former Deputy Premier and former Housing Minister Rich Coleman is serving as the interim leader for the party. I'm unsure if that means he will or will not be able to throw his hat in the ring, but I think what is best for the party is new blood, but at the same time, a familiar face to British Columbians. And currently, I can only think of one person who could possibly come in win a leadership election and still prevail against John Horgan in an unfair snap election after they become leader. And that person is the former mayor of Surrey and current Conservative MP for South Surrey White Rock, Diane Watts. Watts was the mayor of Surrey from 2005 to 2014 and was very popular during her time as mayor. And Surrey is where the BC Liberals lost this last election to the NDP, mostly based on tolls on bridges out there, but also on a promise to keep Uber out of this province, as Surrey is home to a disproportionate number of taxi licenses. Watts can break through in these urban areas as she knows what civic politics are all about, and yet Conservatives and rural supporters in the BC Liberal base, where most of their support came last election, will feel at ease knowing that this former Member of Parliament is a Conservative. There are a couple other intriguing choices for leader as well. Kevin Falcon, a former finance minister under Clark, although he's currently making plenty of money in the private sector. But if Falcon does run, expect a campaign similar in policy to Maxime Bernier, who he somewhat surprisingly endorsed during the Conservative leadership campaign earlier this year. As for Watts, there is some risk in her doing this. She's a one-term MP not eligible for her pension yet, and perhaps she fancies herself in line for a place in Andrew Scheer's cabinet. But she will need to weigh the chances of a Scheer government against her own chances to win the BC Liberal leadership. And right now, I'd say the odds are better for the latter. Watts told the Globe and Mail over the weekend that while she's been receiving a lot of calls and emails about the race, she told the Globe, quote, "I have not made any decisions at all one way or another," unquote. Well, BC, let's keep those emails and phone calls heading her way and let her know this province needs her and that she could well be John Horgan's worst nightmare. For the Rebel.media, I'm Christopher Wilson. I'll be covering this BC Liberal leadership campaign from start to finish, so make sure you click subscribe to our Rebel Canada YouTube page and never miss a video.